Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator, welcoming you to AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration industry. I'm delighted to be joined once again by Alan Brawn, who is principal of Brawn Consulting and also the writer of our longtime column, AV Brains and Brawn.
As always, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page, and please subscribe to the AV Plus podcast on Apple and on Spotify.
Thank you so much, Alan, for being here today. Really appreciate your perspective and really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about marketing and sales and how to run your business better.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I never fail to do one of these podcasts where I don't come away with a little bit more enthusiasm and some ideas for future articles. So you and I both know a little bit about what we're going to discuss today, and you know as well as anybody that I tend to write about what I'm passionate about, and I don't think today's topic is anything other than a great example of passion for the business world that you and I live in. So happy to be here.
Well, I think that's exactly why people love reading AV Brains and Brawn every single month, because it is such a passion-infused article. Clearly, you're not just phoning it in. You're writing about things you really believe in and ways that you believe the industry can be stronger and better and more customer-focused and give our sales and marketing personnel a real something to hang their hat on and grow into and not just kind of copy the ways of the 80s or the 90s. So getting into that, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of the ideal customer profile and how that relates to sales and marketing today. I want to set the table, though, by just kind of recognizing, I think you agree with me, that we do kind of live in a commodity world where a very large portion of the sale, probably a majority portion of the sale, is made before a salesperson is involved. And sometimes the salesperson is trying to fight their way into the conversation. Can you just kind of give us a backdrop of where we are today? Do you agree with that characterization, and how do you explain it?
Well, yeah, and as you know, I'm very fortunate that my team at Brawn Consulting, they take care of the quote unquote business that we do at our company, and they've given me the ability to spend a disproportionate amount of my time looking at the business, looking at the industry, and having been in it for about 40 years, I think I have some degree of perspective, having worn many hats. The specific percentage you quote, the 70%, just so that our listeners and readers that listen to this or read about this know, this 70% doesn't come out of the thin air of Dan Ferrisi or Alan Brawn. This actual data has been really well researched by people like Gartner and people like Harvard Business and people like HubSpot and McKinsey and other major marketing companies. It's accepted that the majority of the buying decision happens before or even if a salesperson gets involved. And so what this means is that the industry doesn't need salespeople the way they have always needed salespeople. And you know as well as anybody, we've done podcasts on the need for a new sales approach, but this is even a more granular topic that we're talking about today. This gets into the heart of what a business needs to do to be more targeted in their marketing and in their sales approach. So yes, this is where we're at today. Buyers are now literally taking things in their own hands, thanks to the internet, or maybe not thanks to the internet, depending upon which way you look at it, of course. But the issue is, and I'll give all of our listeners a little bit of a little bit of food for thought, in that, just because somebody looks up something on the internet, it's one of those things where we really are in a position where our salespeople are having to say to customers, you think but this may not be what you need to know. And if you think about this from an internet perspective, when people go and buyers tend to go on the internet, they make decisions that are not proper, and we have to address this. But I digress. This whole topic is how we can get people, companies, integrators, but even manufacturers and distributors to adopt more of a targeted marketing and a targeted sales approach. This is where we're at.
So picking up on that idea of a targeted marketing approach, a targeted sales approach, I think you've kind of recognized the fact and acknowledged the fact, both in your writing and verbally now, that for a long time, there's been a trend in some ways to kind of cast as wide of a net as possible to attract customers. The idea that we should be everything to everyone, make your product or service everything to everyone. But it's expensive. It wastes a lot of time. I don't really think, and I know you don't really think it drives customer value. I think you've actually described it as kind of a shotgun approach, and just to illustrate kind of how diffuse and ineffective it is. So let's talk more about the ideal customer profile and the idea of actually targeting your product or your service or your offering to a particular idealized niche, potentially audience.
Well, first of all, there's a journey to the ideal customer profile. And in my thought process, as I've been researching this topic, and I'm mesmerized by the idea of target marketing and targeting sales. And a lot of people get put off by targeted marketing and targeting sales because it's more difficult, and it is, but sans the ability to actually target who the likely customer is going to be and sell to who the likely customer is going to be. That's that shotgun approach I talk about. And you're right, Dan, it's expensive. And it's kind of a natural, if you think about it a minute, it's kind of a natural reaction that people have. It's like, well, wait a minute, I'm a manufacturer, or I'm a distributor, or I'm an integrator, and I'm kind of getting a little bit out of control because people are doing work on their own, and there are a lot more stakeholders that I have to deal with inside the company. So what am I going to do? And so I think their natural reaction, you and I are not being critical, we're just observing that that's a natural reaction to try to be everything to everybody and everywhere. But what research shows is I've developed what we call, what I call the four keys to the marketing and sales kingdom, if you will. And the four keys are this, and it starts out, first of all, before we can get to the ideal customer profile, it's quantifying the market. Now, I'm not going to get into it in depth because we don't have enough time to talk about the topic in depth, but the four key elements, or keys to the kingdom, as I call them, are, first of all, you got to quantify the market. Again, manufacturers, distributors, or resellers, integrators, you got to quantify the market. It could be the total available market. It could be the service available market, and it could be what they call the service obtainable market. In short, real simply, total available market, everybody's familiar with. That takes work to figure out what that is. That takes research. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it takes time. And as I said before, I'm fortunate that I have the time. Some people are going to push back and say, well, I don't have the time. And my response to that was, well, do you have the time to grow your business? So everybody knows the total available market, but a lot of people aren't aware of what the serviceable available market, easy for me to say, or the SAM is. Well, the serviceable available market is just simply that it's a subset of the total available market. So what could I possibly reach? And then the service obtainable, the SOM market, is who is my customer? So we start with that. That's the first key to the kingdom that we talk about. But now we get to the ICP, right? The individual customer profile, identifiable customer profile. Now, a lot of people, and again, this is hard work. The combination of Dan Ferrisi and Alan Brawn are not suggesting to anybody viewing this that this is not hard work. This is not a silver bullet. It's not easy. It isn't snap your fingers and make it happen. Yes, Dan and Alan are saying to you, we know this is hard work. We can prove it, but it's well worth the effort. So the ICP, the identifiable customer profile, the perfect customer profile, who's going to buy from me? Well, it takes research. You're going to want to know about company size. You're going to want to know about the technologies that they use. You're going to want to know about what vertical market. So I won't belabor the point, but you really got to do an ICP, individualized, kind of a customer-focused research program that says, I know these people are most likely to buy, and you have to identify them. And one size doesn't fit all, as you know. It's going to be different in education. It's going to be different in healthcare. It's going to be different in retail. So that relates back to my comment, the Ferrisi Brawn concept that, yes, Dan and Alan know it's going to be hard work, but it's well worth it. So that's where it all starts. And the payoff is that you're going to be able to target your market and spend your dollars where they're going to be, and your time where it's going to be most effective.
And I think that's so important, given that integrators these days and AV companies broadly these days do not have a lot of time to waste, do not have a lot of money to waste on fruitless efforts. If they're going to make an investment like this, obviously it's going to yield dividends. But as you say, it is going to take a substantial amount of work. kind of wondering from your perspective, who should be doing this research effort, this research initiative? Is this a role of sales? Is this a role of marketing? Is there a meaningful difference between sales and marketing these days? And what kind of skill sets, what kind of people are well equipped to do this kind of a deep dive research that ultimately will pay so much dividends, even if it is a substantial upfront investment?
Well, it's actually a great question, and it's a simple answer, but it's one that some people don't want to accept. This whole research, identifying the target markets, the ICPs, understanding the TAM and the SAM and the SOM, and understanding all of that is fully within the paradigm of the marketing team. The marketing team has to be responsible. Now, why do I say it's marketing instead of sales? Because some people will come back and say, well, the sales have to identify the customer, and that's wrong. Not in today's world. The sales needs to be out there bridging that gap of the 70% of the decision is made before the salesperson is involved. So sales is going to take a very important role, but the tool in the toolbox that the salespeople have to have is, you got to make my job just a little bit, it's not easy, but a little bit easier by telling me exactly what the total available market is, what the target market is, what the profiles are of the ICP. You got to give that to me, because that gives me the tools then to go forth and multiply. And so that clearly resides in the marketing department. The type of people, and you and I have talked about this many times, too many people mistake the concept of marketing with advertising. And they mistake it for, okay, well, it's social media and search engine optimization and eyes on a LinkedIn post or Facebook post or Instagram post or all of that, and they connote marketing directly with that. If you really take a look at marketing at its core as a profession, it has to do with the psychology of the sale. It has to do with the TAM, with the SOM, with the SAM. It has to do with the ICP. It's got to do with all of the psychodynamics of who is going to buy our products. Harvard Business says it best when they talk about the business order of things. Number one is product. If you don't have a product, you don't got nothing, right? So product is number one, but marketing is clearly number two, followed by sales, followed by support, and followed by operations. So that marketing person is the key element. After understanding you've got a good product, then you got to find out where it fits and who's going to buy it. That's marketing.
So let's go back to that keys to the kingdom, because I think, as a writer, and I know you've written probably hundreds, if not thousands of articles over the course of your career, you know how to boil things down to kind of key takeaways. So let's return to those keys to the kingdom. We talked first about, quantifying the total addressable market and understanding the serviceable available market. It's easy for me to say too.
It doesn't exactly roll off our tongues, ladies and gentlemen, but trust me, whether Dan can say it or Alan can say it, the truth of the matter is, it's important to understand.
It is. I'm going to try it again. The serviceable available market and the serviceable obtainable market. So that was kind of the first key to the kingdom. Then you mentioned identifying the ICP, the ideal customer profile, recognizing the fact that one size does not fit all, and there needs to be some tailoring here. So let's now go to the third one of those keys to the kingdom, the idea of employing new marketing and sales methodologies. What are some of those methodologies that you think that marketing and sales people in the commercial AV industry and integration companies should be starting to implement?
Well, no sales pitch intended here, but in the new sales course that we've rolled out, as you know, and some of our regular readers and viewers know, 2.5 years ago, Avixa reached out to me and said, we do a great job with technologies, but we don't do much in the way of sales training. So we came up with our new program called Sales New Role and the Importance of You. Inherent in the title of the course is the fact that today the single most important person in the sales process, with no disrespect to the CEO of a company and whoever the chief operation officer and all this, the most important person is the salesperson, because they're the one that carries the company message to the buyer. And so the most important relationship in Sales New Role and the Importance of You the new role is that, and you've heard it before, the most important thing is 3 feet across the counter from the salesperson to the buyer. But what's different today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I mean, you started almost 20 years ago. I started almost 40 years ago. So you and I are hardly, when I started, I actually had hair, and my hair was brown. So you and I have been around the block for, shall we say, a number of years. But it used to be, it was trite to say it, but it was that 3 feet across the table from the seller to the salesperson, if you will, to the buyer. But today it's different in the sense that the salesperson has a new responsibility. And the new responsibility is to understand what we call that target persona of the target persona of the person sitting across the table. Now, it's no longer, it used to be, when you started, and certainly when I've started, a salesperson would go in and they'd see 2 or 3 people, that they might have to interchange with across that 3 feet chasm, if you'll accept that metaphor. It used to be that. Well, today, Gartner has shown that sometimes because of the ubiquity and availability of big data and information, whether it's right or wrong, it's still there. And so now it's anywhere from 12 to 24 people who are involved in making that decision. And what further exacerbates the challenge, if you will, is that some of the people the salespeople are going to talk to are going to be the people who are able to buy or charged with buying the product or the project. And some of the stakeholders are going to be people who use the product. So now, instead of just, Dan or Alan putting our sales hats on, we're going to go talk to 2 or 3 people. Now, all of a sudden, we have to go in and we're going to talk to 12 or 24 people. And we're going to talk to people who have the ability to sign the check. But the people who influence the sales are going to be the people who use it. So now it's taken this sales role. So when I say, sales new role and the importance of you, I hope our listeners, our viewers, our readers, I hope they understand that it is an increased role in sales, and it's an increased role in marketing. Marketing has to do the research, then sales has to follow that up, believing in and trusting and having faith in the research, because salespeople like to have confidence in what they're presenting to those people that are 3 feet across the table. And so I hope our viewers, our listeners, our readers, I hope they can understand this expanded role. And there is no easy way around it, Dan. I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, and I know you aren't either. But the fact of the matter is, this is the new reality of business today. So that new role is the change role. Changes in marketing, changes in sales, and most certainly changes in that sales relationship. And that's why, the 4 keys to the kingdom that I talk about: understanding the market, understanding the ICP, understanding the personas, and then applying new sales methodologies and technologies and new marketing methodologies and approaches. That's what's so critical in today's market. If we accept this and we adopt it and we adapt to it in our own ways, one size doesn't fit all. This is not a script. If we adapt and adopt, then we're going to be successful and our companies are going to grow.
I think that's exactly right. And I appreciate the fact that you're elucidating how closely and how tightly marketing and sales have to align. They have to work together. They have to work synergistically. But at the same time, they do have their individual roles. Obviously, you and I have both seen X number of people whose title is, Vice President of Sales and Marketing or Director of Sales and Marketing. But marketing and sales are 2 different things, just like marketing and advertising are 2 different things. And recognizing they have to work synergistically and work together and amplify each other's efforts, but they're not actually the same, I think is worth highlighting.
Well, and let me just interject and say, you and I both know, again, you and I are not newbies around here. 20 to 40 years in the business is a pretty decent tenure, to say the very least. And if we look at the big companies, in fact, when I was vice president of sales and marketing for Hughes JVC, and I should not have been. Some people might say I shouldn't have been employed at all, but those who might be a little bit more kind to me, the truth of the matter is I should have been vice president of marketing, or I should have been vice president of sales. How many companies do you know, and how many companies do I know to this very day? And we won't mention any names because it would be inappropriate. But I ask our viewers, I ask our readers and our listeners to just look at how many companies do you work with today where there is a separate department in sales and marketing And here's the most significant challenge, and they don't talk to one another. It's that bridging that symbiotic relationship between sales and marketing that has to be the change. It's no longer marketing and then ... and sales. It has to be sales/marketing, symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You used the word a few moments ago, personas, understanding buyer personas, understanding user personas, and also emphasized the fact that more stakeholders are involved in decision-making now than ever before. I mean, you could end up with a relatively large group of influencers, even if only one or two people are actually the final decision makers. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by personas? Are they essentially kind of representations? What should we understand the word persona to be?
No, thank you. You and I both had private conversations about buzzwords like the experience and communication and teamwork. And it's kind of like Potter Stewart, the old Supreme Court justice, when he's asked to find pornography, he says, I don't know it, but I know it when I see it. And so, that's what experience and teamwork and communication. The word persona could be thought of in the same ilk. What I'm talking about in persona is the American Psychological Association. Here's the professorial academic hat coming on, so please forgive me. But in some of my research, and again, thanks to my team for allowing me to be able to spend most of my time doing these sorts of things, the American Psychological Association has 6 different reasons that people buy. 6 different reasons that people buy. And they're all deeply personal. So, some of it can be risk abatement. It can be the desire for love. And we won't make any jokes about that. By love, the American Psychological Association is talking about peer acceptance and recognition and those kind of things. But some of it is fear of failure. So they've got 6 different points, but they're all deeply personal. So when I talk about personas, I'm not talking about positions in a company. I'm not talking about the buyer or the senior sales manager or the person who's in charge of IT or whatever department head. We're not talking about that. Personas, when I speak of them, this is that personal connection that we have to understand. I want to understand. I had a quick story. I spent 9 years in the photographic industry before my near 4 decades in this business, and everybody has mentors in this. And I had a little short, rotund. He was kind of built like a bowling ball. The gentleman's name was Dick Scoble, God rest his soul. And this guy was a classic old world salesperson. And he sat down. He told me 2 things. He said, the first thing he told me was, when you get up in the morning and you have a really good day, I want you to work 12 to 14 hours that day. If you get up in the morning and you start to have a really bad day, immediately go, and this was Dick's words, not mine. He says, go to the nearest bar and get drunk because you're not going to have a good day. The second thing he told me was really important. He says, the most important person to you, Alan, as a seller of photographic equipment services, is the receptionist behind the desk. I said, really, Dick? And he says, yeah, just remember, I want you to know her birthday, how many kids she has, etc., because she is the gatekeeper. And back then it was a she. But whoever it might be, they're the gatekeeper. And he says, they're the ones, if you can have a bond with them, a personal bond, that's going to be your open door policy to everybody inside a company. So I remember that. And I don't go to the bar, even when I'm having a bad day. I don't go to the bar and get drunk. But I do remember what Dick was saying. And what Dick was saying is we hear it's a relationship business. It's a people don't buy from companies, they buy from people. But what's necessary today more than it ever was before, Dan, is I want to understand more about the persona. What's your pain point? What's your job? What do you care about? What are you concerned about? What causes you angst? What causes you, to feel, some degree of pleasure and contentment and joy within your job? So when we talk about personas, I'm talking about we have the responsibility to get to know the people, the human beings that we deal with. And if we can bridge that gap, that everything else that follows becomes much more easy to accomplish.
So on that topic of personas, just to align with what I had mentioned before, which is that you emphasized the fact that now more decision makers are involved in this process than ever before. Even if they're not the final decision makers, they're an influencer. It makes sense to me, and let me know if I'm correct, that there are probably different personas within the organization, since we're talking about individuals. So it can't necessarily be that my client is company X and their persona is X. You have maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different people at the table, all of whom potentially might have slightly different personas, slightly different pain points, slightly different buying habits. How do you manage and juggle all of that if all of these people have a seat at the table to greater or lesser extent?
Well, everybody, well, first of all, and you mentioned something that we should just clarify. There can be a company persona, and the synonym for company persona in this case, as you probably already have figured out, is company culture. You know, what is the company culture? What's the vibe? You know, I guess that's the word. You know, what's the vibe? What's the feeling? What's the emotion? Do you walk in the company, and does it walk inside the company? Does it feel like an autocratic, dictatorial kind of an environment? Is it collaborative? Is there teamwork, et cetera, et cetera? So when we talk about there is a company persona, a company culture, for absolutely certain. And I think probably a couple of years ago, I wrote an article on company culture, and it's critical because people tend to stay with companies because of company culture, not because of any one of the other elements. But you ask a very good question. That is, how do you handle all the diversity of those people? And the answer is, it's impossible for us to get to know in depth every single person that might have an opinion. And opinions, you know, the old joke is opinions are like noses. Everybody has one. And opinions can be very polarizing. You know, all of a sudden, if I say to you, Dan, what's your favorite color? And you say, my favorite color is green. I can't say wrong. You know, that, you know, and Alan, what's your favorite? My favorite color is red. You can't say wrong because that's my perspective, my opinion. It is very subjective and not objective. And so when you take a look at an organization, again, the most important person in this whole scenario is, you guessed it, the salesperson. Yes, folks, you salespeople out there, pay attention, because now you have to do an evaluation, not just of the company, not just of the persona of the company, not just in the ICP. And the ICP, if you think about it, is kind of a higher level look at the identifiable, you know, perfect customer profile kind of writ large. But now you got to go into a company, and now you got to drill down into the details, and you got to take a look at the hierarchy of things, the decision makers, and then the people that are going to influence the decision makers. And you have to figure it out for yourself. Like, obviously, I've got to drill down into more depth with the big decision makers, but then I've got to make an evaluation of those people with opinions. It could be a department head. It could be somebody with a megaphone, with, I guess we could call it a big mouth or a loud voice. But then you have to go to the most obvious people who are going to not only buy, but influence the sale. And you kind of have to leave it there, showing respect for everybody, but you have to prioritize. And this is one of the beautiful things, and why I always preach the gospel of, we need salesmen, not the same way we've needed salesmen before, but we actually need salespeople more than we've ever needed them before. And that's one of the roles.
More than we've ever needed them before. So many,
sir.
I think, salespeople feel like they may be a dying breed insofar as you say, people go into the sale thinking that they know everything, thinking they have all the information, but salespeople still do have an essential role to play, just like marketers do, provided that they're approaching this in the way that you're suggesting, the new way, the person-focused way, not the scattergun way. As we're approaching about a half hour now, I'm looking to wrap up and just asking for any closing thoughts you might share with our audience. Obviously, as we both acknowledged from the outset, this is not an easy project to undertake. This is not an easy mindset shift to just kind of move into and say, oh, I'm going to do this now. I'm not going to worry about the scattergun approach. I'm not going to make that investment. What I'm going to do is invest my time and my energy in making sure, A, that sales and marketing are fully aligned, and B, making sure I have a sense of who my ideal customer is, what their needs are, what their pain points are, how they want to be communicated with, and how I can target and tailor my pitch directly to them. Any closing thoughts about how best to do that, or why it's essential for integrators not to just listen to this podcast and say, that's an interesting perspective, and then go back to the way they've always done things, but rather to really lean into the potential of this pivot?
Well, well, number one, thanks for the opportunity to discuss this topic. I mean, you and I do this 2 or 3 times a year, and then of course, obviously, we've got the monthly articles. But the passion is not just out of Alan Brawn or just not out of Dan Ferrisi. The passion is drawn out of the fact that, as you and I and most of the people listening to this either know or should know, this is an existential topic that we're dealing with. We can choose to get on this bandwagon as an industry, and we can find a new way to do business. And the old way to do business was you manufactured something, it was sold directly to a reseller. Now, of course, mostly it goes through distribution. And we got the integrator, we got the reseller, you have a salesperson goes out and they call on a customer, and the customer is just waiting with bated breath for that salesperson to tell them everything they wanted to know, or the salesperson thought they needed to know. That doesn't exist the way it did in 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. We have seen a migration to commoditization and parity. So we live in a new world. And so this is an existential thing. And it's not that we're going to go out of business. We're not, but that the business is going to change and is changing and has changed. And we need to change along with it. And the important thing, and we talk about it in sales, new role, and the importance of you, forgive the sales pitch. But we talk about the concept. I bought this book. It was really cool, Dan. I bought this book, and it was all about marketing and sales methodology. And the book was, I don't know, 2 inches thick. And the only thing I took away from the book that was new and unique was the concept of a business fit. So I'll leave our listeners, our viewers, our readers with this thought. Today, we have to find, as integrators, manufacturers, and distributors, we have to find that business fit. That business fit is something that we provide a value. We as integrators, distributors, manufacturers, something we provide a value to the customer, where the customer saying, tell me something I don't know. We've got to provide a business fit. It's not about the product. It's not about the solution. It's about looking at sales and looking at resellers and distributors and manufacturers as something more than the purveyor of product. Purveyors of product are a dime a dozen. Finding people who are going to help me with my business, who are going to reduce my risk, who are going to help me find a new reality and a new success as an end user in my company, those are the people that create value as a business fit. So I'd leave everybody with the thought of, look how you as a company can provide a business fit. But as Dan rightfully says, a lot of homework goes into this. You don't have to take a big gulp out of the out of the glass, but you certainly ought to begin sipping some of the liquid of this new experience if you want to grow your company the way we think you should.
Always very eloquent, always very informative. Thank you so much, Alan, not only for partnering with us on these podcasts 2 or 3 times a year, but of course also that strong organizational partnership of helming the AV Brains and Brawn column every month. I know you're a powerful expositor of this new way of doing business, and you recognize the fact that sales and marketing both have to change. And I think you're really kind of leading the way in helping the integration community be stronger, the commercial AV industry overall be stronger. So thank you for your efforts. Thank you for raising your voice, and thank you for articulating yourself so clearly and giving people a path to follow.
If nothing else, we have an opinion to share.
Once again, so happy to have been joined by Alan Brawn, who is principal of Brawn Consulting and, of course, the longtime columnist with Commercial Integrator for the AV Brains and Brawn column. My name is Dan Ferrisi, editor-in-chief with Commercial Integrator and host of AV Plus. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please check back on commercialintegrator.com each and every Friday for a new edition of AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration industry. Have a great day.